Changed audio tapes queued up. As soon as we learn that the video is ready to go. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Again, 35th Annual Cancer Control Society Convention, the Sheraton Universal Hotel, Universal City, California. Our next speaker is someone that I met in January, and it was a fascinating experience. And some of you may have seen he just made a significant contribution to the Cancer Control Society. And the story that he has, that he's going to tell, I think is truly remarkable. Kevin Wright is a businessman from the UK. He has a son, 2 years ago, was diagnosed with a neuroblastoma. And then this is his story. Kevin, thank you very much for taking the time to come.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everybody. I came here to tell you about my son Bobby. He was born in February 2002. He had an undiagnosed breech birth at home, and he was perfect apart from an undescended testicle, which I was told by the doctors is just one of those things. But of course I now know that it indicates some kind of hormone disruption whilst in the womb. The testicle was brought down while under general anaesthetic just after his first birthday. All was well for the next 2 years. Bobby grew and developed normally. I was very pleased that my wife breastfed him for 2.5 years with no problems until our family doctor gave my wife Jackie antibiotics, which he said she could breastfeed on. But when we checked, we found that breastfeeding should be stopped while taking this drug. We'd always had trust and faith in our family doctor, who we thought knew best. The only type of medicine we had ever used was allopathic. Bobby's third birthday, February 05, this picture was taken on his birthday. It came and it went. But it was around this time that we noticed Bobby was not keen on walking. He wanted to ride in his pushchair more than our daughter did at his age, but we just put it down to him being a boy and being a bit lazy. On Good Friday morning of 2005, Bobby was 3 years and 3 months. Jackie was dressing him and saw that he had a swelling in his left groin and a cellulitis type rash on the front of his left thigh and a noticeable limp. She took his temperature, which was on the high side, so as it was a public holiday, she took him to our local hospital as the family doctor's surgery was not open. The doctors at the hospital diagnosed osteomyelitis, bacterial infection of the bone marrow, and admitted him as an inpatient so that a course of IV antibiotics could be given. Over the next 2 weeks, various different antibiotics were given, which achieved only temporary relief of his symptoms. During the third week, an incision was made in the outside of Bobby's left thigh, and holes were drilled in his femur to, quote, let the antibiotics into the bone marrow. But still no change. His CRP was up and down. The worst part of all this was the insertion of a cannula every other day, which never found a vein first time, and I cried with him. It was during this third week that while in my village pub after leaving the hospital at 9 p.m, that another local who was a retired doctor and knew that Bobby was in hospital took me to one side and asked if the paediatricians had mentioned malignant processes. I was stunned. I was shocked. I was in disbelief that my friend could mention cancer in the same breath as my son's name. Of course they hadn't. Bobby had a bacterial infection of his bone marrow, not cancer. We've had no cancer whatsoever in either my or my wife's family, and I mean not one case. But the seed had been sown. At pub closing time, I went to my office, which is in an outbuilding at my home, and hit the internet. And to my complete horror, I found that most cancers can spread to bones and bone marrow. I went to bed at 3 a.m. but couldn't sleep. I decided I wouldn't mention this to my wife. I would ask a consultant paediatrician the next day. I cornered a doctor in private that next day, and he said that actually a bone marrow biopsy, bone trophine and CT scan had been considered by the medical team, and that as Bobby was not improving, they would be scheduling the test for the start of the next week. I was privately frantic. I could not believe that Bobby might have cancer, but it was something that I had to get my head around. Denial would help no one. The biopsies and CT were carried out, and the next day we were called to an office, and on entering, Jackie immediately started crying. There was a new doctor on the team in the room. Jackie knew that he's an oncologist, as she'd worked in that hospital as a nurse before we started our family. The doctor said that Bobby had stage 4 neuroblastoma with metastases to bones and marrow. His primary tumour site was his left adrenal. The tumour was bilobed and 7 centimetres by 8 centimetres, but it had spread into every bone marrow cavity, into his skull vault, and he had 2 further tumours on his left femur. I was so very, very angry. The 4-week misdiagnosis was unforgivable, but I now know that many parents take their kids to doctors dozens of times over a 12 or even 18-month period before a neuroblastoma diagnosis is made, because it is such a rare cancer. I asked, what's the survival rate for this neuroblastoma? I was told under 20% survive 1 year and 3% survive for 5. What's caused this, I asked. No one knows, was the reply. There's no money going into researching causes. What can I do to improve his chances? Nothing, was the reply. What about diet? They said there's no evidence that diet makes any difference at all. We should let Bob eat whatever he wants to reduce the inevitable weight loss. Now, I'm not stupid, yet these people were obviously wrong. So I said, okay then. So we take child A, we give him a Burger King for breakfast, a KFC for lunch, McDonald's for dinner, plenty of Pringles, lots of Diet Coke. And then we take child B and feed him a diet based around home-cooked food. Are you telling me that they'll do the same? The answer was the same again. There's no evidence to show that there would be any difference in outcome. Now, I was already steamingly, ragingly furious, and to be told such complete and utter rubbish just added to my fury. I just refused to believe that with the technology available in the 21st century, that we couldn't at least have an educated guess on causes. As far as diet is concerned, the UK health authorities have been spending millions of pounds on education to tell us that we should eat at least 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. I ended the meeting right there, right then, as to argue with these people was obviously pointless. They obviously have a very narrow knowledge where cancer is concerned. They may know their chemo, etc., but to say diet would make no difference showed their total ignorance to me.